very warm welcome to Eye on the Money, the television show that gives you insights into how to improve your financial well-being as well as make your money work for you. I'm Ingrid Nantege. Now, on today's show, we discuss debt management, particularly amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, for far too many, the coronavirus pandemic has caused an unexpected financial crisis, unlike anything they've experienced before in their lives. With a loss of incomes and livelihoods, individuals and families have been put in a precarious financial situation. With job stability in question for many and bills still requiring payment, it's understandable that a lot of people feel as if they've been stuck between a rock and a hard place and have even opted to get reprieve from financial institutions in terms of loans or debt. Now, joining me on the show to discuss debt management in the pandemic is none other than Amos Ngahu, author and coach at Money Clinic. You're welcome to the show, Amos.
Thank you.
You look very nice, by the way. You look like you already know. So, Amos, today we're going to talk about debt management.
Yes.
And unless you've been living under a rock, we all know the sort of impact the pandemic has had on livelihoods, on people's incomes, and as a result, people have opted to obviously seek solace wherever they can in the form of debt.
Yes.
So as an expert and someone who's really good with money, what would be your thoughts on debt and just people amassing it, particularly within this time, to survive the pandemic?
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me once again. And I remember there was, when the first time there was a lockdown, the first interview we had, we were talking about, how people need to behave, especially at this time. And we said, one of the things that we said is that do not panic. Because one of the reasons, you remember the first time people were rushing to buy tissues, to buy sanitizers, only for 2-3 months later, they're back in stock. And you're wondering why you have so much tissue. So I feel like we should do away with the panic mode and start focusing on how we can handle our expenses without really having to borrow. Because one of the worst debts that you can get yourself into is consumer debt, where you're borrowing to consume and or to meet a certain expenditure. Actually, even with the government, it's illegal to actually borrow to fund a recurrent expenditure. So it should be something that should never cross your mind, that you're borrowing to fund a certain expense. Because at the end of the day, even when COVID is gone, you still have to pay the debt. So we need to totally avoid it. You'd rather even look for ways of raising funds. Even personally, I tell people, even on the other hand, don't get into a habit of funding someone's behavior. Okay? If you're the one, if it's a personal loan, every time you're asking me for 300 bob to do something, you'll pay me at the end of the day. Or you haven't been paid, today is 30th, and you're expecting your salary on 5th, and you're telling me I need 5 Gs to do something. So even those of us who want to lend, stop funding people's bad habits, because at the end of the day, they will never stop it. But if you can tell them, you know what, you're traveling, you just wait until your salary comes. Yeah.
So, and you've mentioned something that's very important, Amos.
Yes.
You've said a big no to funding, to getting out debt to fund consumption, recurrent expenditure.
Yes.
Does that then mean that it's all right, there are certain situations where it's all right to take out debt? And also, again, Amos, if we're to make reference to the current realities, right? We're seeing a situation where there are certain people who don't even have any food to eat. So what if me, the kind of debt I'm taking out is I'm walking to my kiosk, just to get a bit of cooking oil, just to get a bit of rice to survive. That's consumption still. But which debt is all right to take out within this time? And what would you say about these other small, tiny, loans we take out to survive?
You see, by the time you have gotten into a habit of, you have your local shop, the shopkeeper has a small book that every time you send your kids or your house help, they record it. It's something that you have already normalized, that you don't know it's bad for you. So one of the things that you need to do, that is just a symptom of a bigger problem. And that's where now we go back now to controlling our expenses. Because remember, if we can control our expenses, then we don't have to borrow to sustain them. And one of the things that I have learned during COVID is that the people who adjusted their expenses early, even as things normalized and things picked up in business, they found themselves with excess because they learned how to adjust their expenses early enough. I saw a group of guys moving from out of town to smaller houses. So by the time businesses were recovering and they had taken the shock and they were now being on the positive in terms of accumulation, they found themselves with a lot of excess. But now you'll find the people who did not adjust in terms of if you're moving into a smaller house, now they are even into more debt right now. Because they never adjusted. So one of the things that really, when you see people borrowing to we are waiting for end month, that's just a symptom of a bigger disease that was there before. That our challenge is really our expenses, and especially domestic expenses. Yes.
And you've made reference to the fact that if you really think about controlling your expenses and putting in place the right measures, then you won't have to even resort to all this.
Yes.
So even as we ask people to exercise caution, particularly now when they take out debts or loans, away from controlling expenses, if you're to give advice on best practices, some of the things people should pick up to, make sure they're still all right without resorting to debt, what advice would you give? You're telling people don't go out and take loans, but what should they do to ensure they don't get into that position that pushes them to get there?
One of the things that pushes people towards high expenses, one of them is pressure. There's a lot of pressure to appear, to make a certain appearance. I will go borrow money to buy a suit so that people don't think I'm broke. And that pressure can come from various corners. It can come from your spouse. It can come from your children. It can come from the people you support back in Kampala. The entire village. It can come from even your peers. I hope
my village mates are listening, because they're not leaving me in the pandemic.
One of the best ways to control these expenses is to deal with that pressure first. And I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine who sells phones, smartphones, and on his status he will talk about the latest iPhone, the latest Nokia, the latest, actually the two big brands, and Samsung. And I asked him, how many people, give me your age, give me your demographics, who are your biggest customers? And he was like, I have sold, was it iPhone 11? I can't remember. But he had sold about 40 pieces in a span of, since they came out. Oh, wow. 40 pieces. But now here's a shocking thing. He had only sold one piece to a person over 50. The rest were guys below 30.
Yeah.
And we're talking a phone that cost close to 150,000.
What?
Yes. And these are the people I'm wondering, where do they get that kind of money?
Where are they getting this money?
You understand? So the thing is, the number one motivation is that there's a lot of peer pressure on getting the latest phone. So one of the things that you have to do is get rid of that pressure. If you have a family member that you support, and things are looking, but the first thing you need to do if you don't have, or that you can't afford it anymore, is make that communication. Hey, I've been supporting you on this, but starting next month, I might slash what I support you with, because this is where I am. They will get offended, but for a reason, or for a season. So start getting rid of that pressure. Even with your kids, start telling them, there are seasons in life, and this is how you adjust. Because remember, if you help your kids understand the money seasons, kids don't listen.
Yes.
They watch.
They see.
Yes. They will observe. I noticed, my elder son, actually, his birthday is today.
Oh, happy birthday.
And I realized this young guy will always pick anything I do, not what I say. Right. He may listen, but he will always pick, and you hear him repeating and telling other guys what he needs to do. So one of the things that you need to do, even prepare your children. Tell them, for us to be able to sustain, to have a good meal, we have to reduce on rent. So we have to go to a smaller house, but maintain the same menu. You understand?
Right.
So that now we compromise on something. Even when they grow up, you reduce the pressure even for them to appear like they're doing well, as long as they understand what is important to them. Same with the spouse. So you have to remove the pressure first. I think that is the key to, first of all, reduce your expenses. So that now when you reduce, it's up to your discretion.
Great.
Yes.
So it's at this very point, Amos, that we're going to take a very quick break. It's a very exciting conversation, and it's because even me myself, let me not lie, almost within this period, I can't tell you how many times, I'm just not good with debt. I try to stay away, but I can't tell you how many times I've been tempted. First of all, financial institutions have these favorable terms that are very, very, you know, attractive to the person. However, we're going to take a very quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a lot more when it comes to debt management amid the pandemic with Amos Ngahu of Money Clinic. Don't go anywhere.